The floor is yours, Dina. Please go ahead.
Hello everyone. أنا بدي رحب بالجميع اللي عم بيحضر معنا اليوم. بحب أعرف عن حالنا. نحن مجموعة CCG Constructive Change Group. أنا القرار ممثلة بأنا القرار على الإعلام. مجموعة من المتعلمين متوسطي الأعمار من خلفية ثقافية واحدة. معظمنا خريجين مدرسة الانترناشنال كوليدج. عندنا نفس الرؤية للبنان اللي هي بالمستقبل ديمقراطي حر سيد حضاري وطن لجميع اللبنانيين. عم نقوم بهالويبينار تقريبا بالجمعة مرة تنعرف أهالي الثورة والشعب على الوجوه اللي نحن بنحب نعرف عنها أكثر ونشوف الطرق اللي فينا نشبك فيها تنتقدم ونوصل للأهداف اللي بنطمح لها للبنان اللي بنحلم فيه. The floor is yours, Wissam.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dina.
وأهلا وسهلا بسلام. سلام يموت. نتشرف تكوني معنا.
So hi everybody, and welcome to this live town hall event, virtual because we can't do it in person. My name is Wissam Yafi, and I'm joined today by a special guest who also happens to be a very good friend and a tech colleague. I first met Salam Yamout during a book tour of mine in 2011, where we struck a conversation, and I realized back then that we shared so many things in common, not least of which in careers and our love for technology and getting things done. Over the years, our paths have crossed several times, notably during her stay in the Council of Ministers, when she led the national ICT strategy for the Republic of Lebanon. I found that very cool, as it had been my thesis during graduate school, and what I had written about Salam was actually practicing within the Lebanese government. Every now and then I would drop by the Sarai and get her feedback, especially I recall during the Syrian crisis when we launched some online education projects to support the public sector. Again, Salam was very supportive and very helpful as we tried to navigate the project through complex tentacles of the Lebanese government. And lately, with the launch of the Lebanon's Bill of Rights, once again, Salam showed quick understanding. May I ask everybody to mute, please, because there's some scratching happening in the background. Thank you. And lately, with the launch of Lebanon's Bill of Rights, once Salam Salam showed quick understanding of its complexities and sprung into action together with the colleagues at the Kitli Wataniye, together with Pierre Issa, to try and help and spread the message, one which is aligned with the Kitli's own sets of beliefs and plans, as we shall see today. Over the years, in all my conversations with Salam, I found her willingness to listen and articulate new ideas and visions quite refreshing. In a country mired with stale and entrenched political class, I, like many of you, have grown quite tired of the same old faces trying to sell us something they do not care to understand, do not believe in, and are not willing to change nor envision an alternative for. Lebanon needs new voices and new faces that come from the people, represent their hopes and aspirations, who can be fully honest and can empathize with them during a very difficult time in the nation's history. And no, they do not have to be billionaires, and they don't have to be muscle men either. They could be like us, from us, and working for us. Through her life and career, Salam has proven her qualifications as a tech exec, as a woman leader working in government, and God knows we need many more of those women leaders, as an activist, and she managed all of this while raising her family. And so please join me in welcoming Salam to this virtual town hall this morning and this afternoon and this evening, wherever you happen to be around the world. Now, before we start the proceedings, I'd like to take care of a couple of housekeeping items. As Dina stated earlier, this is a live event with many participant groups, and also one being shared with Thawra TV via Facebook. As such, we are expecting a heavier than usual attendance, and we welcome everybody. Only ask that you bear with us as we juggle to do all of this and handle the logistics. The program today will start with Salam sharing a few of her thoughts about the plans she is currently leading as the Kitli's president. This will be followed by some intervention on my part, asking some questions on several topics. Each part of these will be sectioned, and each section after that will have the opportunity for participants to raise their hands, virtual hands, and ask questions of Salam. So please make sure you do so via Zoom. And the guys on Facebook, we will try our best to also answer some of your questions. Please put them as a text. Final note is while our events are usually in Arabic and we are proud of our language, we have a sizable expat contingent. So we have opted to use English for everyone to understand. But of course, we invite you to ask your question in Arabic if you feel more comfortable in doing so. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Salam Yamout. Salam, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Wissam. Thank you very much for this kind introduction. Let me start by changing a little bit the rules of the game and starting telling you a little bit about myself, how I got where I am today. So I'm Salam Yamout and the president of the National Bloc. And all my life, I was basically an activist, social activist. My two passions were women empowerment and technology. And around the year 2007, when we were working with the ICT community about broadband, and we had something called the Broadband Manifesto to demand broadband in Lebanon, I discovered that the bottleneck is policymaking. So everything was aligned except the political decision to make the change needed. So eventually I found my way to the presidency of Council of Ministers, where I was responsible for the ICT portfolio. But then I ended up doing a lot of other stuff that they asked me to do, like the EU, donors coordination, safety, and what have you. And I stayed 6 years there. And this is where I discovered that it's not that they don't know, the political class or the political rulers or the ministers or whoever I came across during these 6 years. It's not that they did not know what is needed. There was no will, no desire to do reform. So this is where I left, but my heart was still into the change-making process. And I wanted then to become an active, to continue being an activist, but in the political sense. And this is how about 2 years ago, so I continued my quest. And about 2 years ago, I got introduced to the National Bloc. And this is where I found that it's a party that was at the time, 2 years ago, trying to rejuvenate itself, looking for fresh blood, fresh ideas. And I found in its history, the basis for a good political party. First, it had principles. It was a party, and it's still a party that does not believe in ideology and bends the principles in order to reach the ideology, but rather it's a party that sticks to its principle and stuck to its principle for the last 50 years. This is something that is very important for me. The other thing that I found, that it was a party that has a vision of a modern civil state, a sovereign state. The party believes in the dialogue between the people to solve internal problems, against the civil war, against the bearing of arms among ourselves to solve our problems, or to request foreign assistance at every little or big problems to solve our own problems. And this is how I became active in the National Bloc. And then the next big moment in my life was the Thawra, 17th of October. I had been in 2005, 2015, and 18, but for the first time, I was overwhelmed by the national scope of the Thawra of 17th October. Here, for the first time in my life, I saw young and old, women and men, people from the north, people from the south, rich and poor, everyone. And this is where it dawned on me that this is the end of the civil war. It dawned on me we never came together to discuss our own problems. And finally, the Lebanese had come out to say, stop, enough. And this was an aha moment for me. And this is where I decided that I should maybe give it all I have in order to start making the change that is needed. I realized that the opponent is formidable. It has a lot of resources. a lot of all the money, all the arms, all the institutions of the government, all the experience. And so I decided that this is not something I could do on a part-time or on an ad hoc basis. I needed to do this to give it all I have. My children had told me before that my generation, our generation failed them. This was my way to exonerate them, exonerate all the past that we have been through. And I believe that change is possible. Not only it is possible, we have a plan for it. And my aim as the president of the National Bloc is for the National Bloc to become a true model for political activism. That means it's a democratic party, open to all. It's a platform for people who want to try to do political work, and for a way for all of us to come together to win over this formidable opponent that we have.
Well, thank you very much for sharing this, Salam, with us. You mentioned, I'm going to I was interested in something that you mentioned, which is when the revolution started, you felt that this is a new start for Lebanon. Some people see it as a potential end. So you're kind of seeing it more as a hopeful message. Why do you see it as a start and not the end or is it the end of something and the start of something else?
Hopefully it's going to be the end of something and the start of something else. And usually revolutions take time. I mean, our revolution is only about 6-7 months old. And usually revolutions take time. And revolutions have their own dynamics, their own thing. You know, nobody can put a label on a revolution. The revolution has everything from the far right to the far left, to the people that are truly for an ideal or an idea. Others that are in because somebody asked them to do something. Some people want to break things. Some people want to construct things. So revolution is an uncontrollable beast, right? However, this revolution, and I said about the diversity, at least how it started, and obviously the people have enough, and enough of the corruption, enough of the clientelism that is the mother of all our problem in Lebanon. And the people have spoken. The people came out and said, we want to live. We want to have electricity. We want to have good schools. We want to have healthcare. We want to have jobs, et cetera, which is the right thing. And as the situation, the economic situation is going to become worse and worse, especially that we're not starting with the reforms right away, the revolution will continue. And I find it very, very interesting. And the Lebanese people are mature enough to have asked all of them together without any orchestration, without any leader, one and only one demand, which is to request an independent government as a transition to power in order for us to have eventually elections, parliamentary elections that would then make the difference between what is before the Thawra and what is after the Thawra. I find this very mature politically, and we are all on the same page then. And I think we still should be on this same page, because the way we see it is the transition into an independent government is the only way towards a peaceful transition of power. So, right? So there might be other ways, but this one is the best way, and that allows us to gain time. Because we are in a situation here that we cannot wait anymore. Reforms should have started 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Every day, and with the financial crisis, every day counts. Every day is money lost and more money lost. Every day without reform is going to be maybe another 5 months or 6 months of hardship for the Lebanese. So I join my voice about the demand for a true independent government to lead the transition.
So how would you define independent? And why do you think the incumbents would be willing to give up their current power that they perhaps enjoy in the presidency and the parliament in order to for such independence? What are the dynamics that are happening for such independence to come into power? And how would you define independence to begin with?
Independent is government that is not put by the six political parties, the club, that have been for 30 years, sometimes fighting with each other, but all the time coming together in everything that is important. This club does not believe in democracy as we know it, where there's a majority and an opposition in the minority, and where there is an accountability and democratic process and transparency and accountability in all the basic stuff of any democracy. This did not exist. They're doing this بداية حكومة الوحدة الوطنية. That means they all rule at the same time. But we are no fools, we are not naive. No incumbent would like to give up power just like that. But the proposition of the Thawra to the political parties in charge is, look, it's a win-win situation. First, you must admit that you're responsible for what happened for the last 30 years. To me, it is not acceptable anymore that everybody puts the blame on somebody else or on an idea. We didn't do this because the regional powers, we didn't do this because United States, because Iran, because all of these things. I think we are able to build a country and fight Israel, at least, you know. And the proposition of the Thawra was like, guys, and it was a very smart move, because if they truly put an independent government in place, if that independent government would have done something, they could have said, look, they succeeded because we led them. And if that independent government did not do anything, they could say, look, you cannot do it without us. But this is not the road they chose yet. And we're hoping that I don't know if something on the economy level so disastrous is going to arrive that is going to make them change their mind, like the bad economic situation and more people going down the streets, and it's going to be maybe unbearable and unmanageable for them. Or they're going to come to their senses. I would like to call on them to come to their senses, assume the responsibility that they had for the last 30 years, like any good political leader should, assume the responsibility, admit that you have failed, admit that your system does not work, and let's try to find another way forward.
So I guess it's a fairly easy target to attack the incumbents, and many in the revolution are clearly doing that. One question that a lot of people have with respect to the revolution is, why has it been more difficult for the revolution to create a united front? Wouldn't that make the revolution much stronger in facing these entrenched incumbents and present a more comprehensive case to the Lebanese people and the international community, or the donor community, as you will?
This is a very good question, Wissam. You know, the failure of the state and the failure that we are witnessing is not only on the political system and on the judiciary and on the banks and on the syndicates, and it's on the soul of the people, it's everywhere. The failure, this total failure also is to the opposition. So there is no opposition in place that could have naturally taken a leading role in the revolution. There is nothing. So the people came together, and the people have come together quite nicely, I would say. And here I might disagree with the people that say that we don't talk to each other, or we're like, we have 700 heads. No, all of us together came up with one slogan, which is the independent government, which is a lot. It is a lot, okay? And there was several levels of coordination. So the coordination between the Thawra people and the groups and the forces was happening, and it's happening on an everyday basis. I've witnessed it, and it's working quite fine for organizing manifestations, or doing common papers together on several topics, from the financial crisis to the Eurobond, on the new law for the elections. And I must say that groups as diverse from the extreme right to the extreme left and the center too, have come together to come up with these papers. So coordination is happening, and we are learning to work with each other, which we have never done in the past. And then this is the first level of coordination. And the second level of coalitions is the political coalition. This is something my party believes that is a necessity for the next step. We need to have a strong political coalition that is an opposition. So there are parties that are not in power, that have the common ideas of the 17th of October. They call it the روحية 17 تشرين. Okay, these people should come together in a political coalition to do the opposition. Without opposition, there is no democracy. And this is the second step. And I might say that we are also working on this, and at least the big titles for such political coalitions have become clear. They are a civil state, a common vision for a civil state, يعني دولة مدنية, the rule of law state, يعني دولة القانون, the need for social safety nets as soon as possible, especially that we all see that the economic situation is going to go bad. Or we have the big title of resistance and the arms and all of these questions together. And finally, the liberal economy. So the big titles are already there. And not only we have big titles for the political مشروع السياسي البديل, if you want, but there's also the titles of what needs to be done in the next 18 months. يعني we have the political vision, the political program, but we have also the policy program, which are only four things that need to happen as soon as possible. One is to put an end to the financial crisis. Again, the social safety nets. We think that as soon as possible, poverty and healthcare should be made mandatory, as
We'll cover some of this in a minute under the topic of socio-economics.
So let me jump. So let me just recapitulate. So we have the coordination on the ground. This is happening, has been happening. It's good. The political coalition, that's the next level of coordination. And of course, eventually we're going to have an electoral coalition also work that is different from any political coalition or any coordination on the ground.
In a recent interview that I heard you make, you stated that the type of support that such a coalition, or at least the spirit of the 17th of October represents, from some polling, I don't know the source of the polling, you stated that the support is very high in the population, bordering on the 70%. If the incumbents are not willing to give up power to independents, notwithstanding this level of popular support, would, in your opinion, different parties within the revolution be willing to accept a national unity, or is there some disadvantages to joining some kind of this al-ibda' that you call this creative mechanism of never solving or attempting to solve never solvable problems with these national coalition governments? Would the revolution be inclined to join such a national unity government or not?
I cannot speak for the revolution. Nobody can speak for the revolution itself. I can speak for the National Bloc. I don't think this is going to be possible. But again, the 70% people that you talked about are people that are willing, that support the Thawra and willing to maybe to vote against their usual political leader, but it doesn't mean that they will, right? There are things that the political coalition needs to do in order to prove itself and to become a credible alternative. And this is what we're working on very, very hard. So let's see what the elections results are, because here it's a people's game, Wissam. It's a people's game, and the more and more I do this politics, that I realize that the first big barrage or the barrier is our own minds, is our own belief that change is possible, that a civil state is possible. a civil state that would protect all of us, but at the same time give us the civil liberties that we need to pray, to be religious, and all of that. So there has to be this click in the mentality of the people between a civil contract, a social contract between these tawa'if, between these sects, into a social contract between the people and their state. A friend of mine who's very young, studying political science, once explained to me, she said, even in Europe or all the democracies, first you believe in God to solve your problem, and then you believe in the feudal lord to solve your problem, and then you find out that nobody is doing anything for you. So this is where democracy starts, when you start trusting each other. The people need to trust each other in order to build a democracy. And this is what we have to aim for, because it's going to start and end with the will of the people, with how we see our country, how we want our country to be in a year, 2 years, and hopefully for a long time to come.
So the last question I'd like to pose in this section to you, and then I'd like to see how we can open it up to questions. I think we have a couple of questions here. The last question is, many political leaders, some would argue, from independence, 1943 until the day, there have been some good leaders that have come to the country, and yet the system in and of itself has kind of grinded them or their parties down. What would the revolution, or these independents, if you prefer to use the term, do that's different? You highlighted some of it at this moment, a couple of moments ago, which is like the responsibility or the social contract that basically the people would have to have kind of a self-dependence, so to speak. But is this the spirit of the change that's going to be required? Is it a leadership issue, or is it a people issue?
It's a leadership issue and a people issue, Wissam. As I said, through all my time at the presidency of the Council of Ministers, there were always 4 good ministers in any Council of Ministers. And I think if we go back even to 1990, there were always good people among the ministers. The thing is, it's about what the political ruling class, the political system perceives politics to be. They're not perceiving politics to be policy making for the good of the people. Okay, the مصلحة لبنان, the إدارة شؤون الناس, the things like that. They are perceiving politics to be a mean for them. They're running a country without a vision, without a plan, without a budget, and without KPI. Or let me say that correctly. They have one KPI, is how much money and interest they get from being in power. So the whole political game was based on 2 things. One, I get public money by clientelism in order to serve my political aims, my parliamentary elections gain. And this is how we ended up with 330,000 people on the payroll of the government. And the other way is to do contracts. So when you do contracts, it doesn't matter who's going to maintain the road or who's going to maintain or operate. The important thing is to get a contract in as obscure ways as possible, as hidden under the table as possible, in order to get a cut, right? This is how they operate. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
So basically what you're stating is that it's a monster that feeds itself, which is essentially the leaders are kind of doling out favors from the government in order to bring supporters, and the supporters rely on these leaders. And so in a way, if I'm hearing you correctly, a new class of leaders needs to break that vicious cycle?
Yes, a new class of leaders, yes. A new class of leaders, people who are interested in the good of everyone, يعني مصلحة عامة, and not individual gains. We have to find these people, and they exist. And usually these people are disgusted by politics, like I was 10 years ago, because it's a dirty game. But has come the time, and maybe we should have done it before, but has come the time for the people to take ownership of their country And the way that they have to take ownership is to be in the driver's seat. We have to start driving this country all together, or with a new leadership and with new rules, you know, because the #1 rule that is now happening is corruption. We're not following our own rules. We have Nisa and Dastur, and we have under the table, and we don't have any transparency. We have to start reworking on a principles based, with the basic principles of transparency, of accountability, of putting people in jail when they do wrong. We cannot, it's not like all the fun, everybody's gonna win all the time. Some people will lose, have to lose, they have to be responsible for what we have done. It is not joke. It is not a joke what Lebanon is going through today. It is not fair for all the people that have saved so many years of their life, saving money for their retreat, that the government does not give them for their retirement. And look, there's no money, there's going to be soon no food, I mean, what is left? Already we have no electricity, no water, no garbage, no healthcare, no jobs. So what have we got to lose? We have nothing to lose. It is time for us. It is time for us to all come together and do what is needed to do. We have to reclaim our country.
Thank you, Salam. So I have some questions here. I'm going to open it up. This is within, guys, if you want to raise your hand, please do so through the tool. I see here, I'm going to try and get as many questions as possible. Just a word of guidance to all of you. Please state your name and then your question clearly. And in the words of a university dean of mine, please make sure it's brief and it ends with a question mark. So the first question, I believe we have Jamil and then followed by Farid. Jamil Barraj, could you please go ahead and pose your question? You're on mute, Jamil. Unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hi, Wissam. Thank you for that. Thank you, Salam, for the kind introduction and how you started. So I have a two-part question, I guess. So I've been studying recently the Singapore model fairly elaborately, and by all accounts, Singapore is probably one of the most successful countries in the world, which has been built in a space of 40 years. Lee Kuan Yew came to Lebanon in the 60s, and he wanted to model Singapore on what Lebanon is, and we know what the rest is. And I guess Dubai has followed this model. So my question to you is the following. It's, I'm now starting to be convinced that we need some sort of an authoritarian regime, okay, a fair dictator, where all these things that you have mentioned are not going to be accomplished unless we have some sort of leadership that is really strong and rules with an iron fist. What do you think about this? And my second part, very quickly, is why not be visible? Part of the issues that we have is we don't have proper leadership, okay? For the Thawra people, we don't have proper leadership. Even among Thawra, we have a lot of people who are divided. Some people say, Killon doesn't include Sami Jmail, or whatever. So why not put, and this is from a personal, straightforward question, why not put your hat in the ring and say, I'm going to lead this, and I'm going to be visible, and this is my agenda, and this is the way I'm going to do it. And I'm going to unite all Thawra around this.
Thank you, Jamil, for your questions. Salam?
Sorry about the length.
Oh, it's okay. I mean, fair dictator. I think we've had our, I don't believe in I don't believe in dictatorship, and I don't believe in fair dictatorship. And I tell you why. Because our strength is our diversity, has been our strength for a long time. And I believe in the caravan model. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you're going to go far, you have to go with others. You have to move at the speed of the slowest camel. The problem with dictatorship is it's unsustainable. And dictators become crazy before you know it. They all become crazy. We have our fair examples of people who have gone crazy being dictators or thinking that they alone can solve all the problem. What we need is a new way of thinking. We have to find a new way to turn our diversity and the freedom that we have, not into becoming chaos, but into doing a model that works for all of us. Yeah? So, yes. And even though it's one of the things that you didn't say, but I will go ahead and say it for you, is one of the options in all revolutions, of course, is a military dictatorship. But I would invite you to think about what this would do to Lebanon, especially when foreign powers are going to start to get into the game. And it's going to be, again, before we know it, bloody and uncontrollable. Okay, so this is for the first.
Singapore is the most successful country, ranked consistently 1 and 2. It is a fair dictatorship, and Dubai is not very far behind it. So,
yes, but I mean, let's not. I mean, as you said yourself, Singapore and Dubai, they're what, 1973 and 1960, right? So I'm not. I mean, in the age of countries, we don't look at 40, 50 years. We look at 100, 200 years.
These are miraculous
I myself went to Singapore. I myself went to Singapore, and it's not. I mean. It's a miracle because it's a small country, but what I'd like you to tell me about Singapore and Dubai is that they abide by rules. Let's start there. Do we have to have a dictator just to start abiding by our own rules, by our own constitution, by our own laws? You know, it's different. I mean, some countries abide, and not only abide by their own rules, France and Germany and Iran and a lot of countries abide by their rules, their own rules. We don't even do that. So before we go into dictatorship mode, you know, one more thing about Singapore. When we went there on an entrepreneurship mission with the World Bank, and they listened to us and we listened to them. For everything they do over there, the government puts like 50% operating cost of every company. The government is very, very heavy on everything, this boom of entrepreneurship. And we told them about the Lebanese stories, and they were like, and the government doesn't do this? No, and the government doesn't do that? So we agreed at the end that the best model is to send our entrepreneurs to Singapore to get the best deal out of the cuts. We are ahead of the Singaporean in the entrepreneurial spirit, in the way that we can do stuff on our own. All we need is some order, abide by the rules, do not make exceptions anymore, and do not allow corrupt people to just steal us in front of our eyes. This would be a good beginning. If this doesn't work, Jamil, I'm willing to try the dictatorship with you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Salam.
Okay.
Thank you, Jamil. Farid,
thank you.
Please go. Thank you.
But sorry, the second part of the question.
I think I've gone through it. Nobody speaks for the revolution. I don't think a revolution has necessary leaders. What I said, what we see, the National Bloc sees its role as in a political coalition that is in opposition. This is where we found ourselves. And it's different from leading the revolution. This is something a political party should be. It should be in opposition to the ruling party and class. And that's what we know how to do. This is what we are trying to do. This is our place.
Thank you, Salam.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamil. Farid, please go ahead.
Hi, Salam. Thank you. Hi, Wissam. Actually, I have, what will the National Bloc present to the people as a full program to create trust and to provide security net to replace this, the feudal system, the existing one? And will be the political coalition, is the security net to replace the existing one? Thank you.
Well, sorry, what was the last part? And if
will a political coalition, which you had just spoke about, will it be a way to create this security net to replace the existing one, which is the existing system?
I guess Farid is referring to the quote unquote social safety nets that are offered by the incumbents to each one to their own groups, and how such an opposition could provide an alternative. Correct, Farid?
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so the National Bloc offers to the people a new model for political activism, a democratic one that is bottom up, and it presents a vision for Lebanon, a program made out of 101 policy actions and principles. This is what a political party can do. And also we're providing tools. We have lots of tools, especially for the involvement of the youth in a non-political, non-kitle. They don't have to be as part of the National Bloc in order to start trying for themselves what it means to be politically active through a now separate platform called Af'al. It's based on a snowflake model, and it's totally decentralized, open, inclusive, and community driven. This is what we do. Now for the security safety nets, we are hoping that this is not going to wait for the National Bloc to be in power. We are calling for safety nets, social safety nets, to be in place as soon as possible. As you heard a lot, Lebanon is in a lot of debt, and we've already accumulated about, depending on the numbers, $60 to $80 billion we're in the hole. And our estimates is that in addition to what the government spends already on social safety net, in health and other stuff, if we add $1 billion to that, then we would at least have health coverage for everyone, and health for the poverty.
And I mean, Salam, بس I mean كيف رح تقدروا تقنعوا الناس إنه this is a replacement to their existing system للزعيم تبعهم? How can we prove to them that we're going to provide you a replacement to this security has safety net اللي هن خلقوها all these years? Sorry, I interrupted.
لا معك حق. It's a challenge, Farid. You know, if any of us had the magical wand, maybe we would have done it 30 years ago, right? It's going to be it's an everyday work of 24 hours per day to talk and provide alternatives and explain how it's going to be. And it's the battle. It's what we do as a political party as well. You know.
Thank you, Salam. Thank you, Farid. Just a couple of comments from Facebook to share with everybody. One, Lina Komati says, it's refreshing to hear the point of view of a constructive and hopeful politician. If there's time for all of us to roll our sleeves, then the time is now. Viv Yesbek says, the Thawra people, some Thawra people are in prison. What have you done for them? Also, any ground leaders following their matters up? We can cover this when we get to the judiciary, but I wanted to give you a chance to answer the question now. Do you know of any efforts by some of the revolution groups to support some of those that are being imprisoned because of their protestation?
Yes, it's a very good point. Of course, we are against what is happening. It's one of the tools the political ruling class is using against the Thawra. There are many in their toolbox. One of them is scare us all the time about another civil war that's going to break up and more bloodshed on the ground. And another tool is to imprison the young people under the and not respecting the freedom of speech and stuff like that. There's a cell of lawyers that is working through the Thawra and is providing help to these people and to the people that are in jail. And we totally support this. And we also are against the way that they are using the system. They're not following their own laws even to put these people and to interrogate. It should be under civil rules, under civil law, that they should make the complaints against this youth, these honorable youth. What is happening instead is that they're giving them to secret services, mabahis, aman dawle, which is really unconstitutional. And as I said, there's a bunch of lawyers who are working together in order to help them, to help the people. in jail.
Thank you for that. Judy Makhoul is our next question. Could you please unmute yourself and pose your question to Salam?
Good afternoon. Yes, Judy Makhoul. Thank you very much for this very, very interesting webinar so far. To be a little bit more practical, the bigger title of the Higher Council of Judges, Majlis al-Qada al-A'la, what role could it have, if any, and could that be a practical starting point to start taking some corrupt individuals to where they should be, and maybe then should that be a good starting point for people to regain trust in some sort of aspect of this whole system? Would that be a good way of doing it, and what needs to be done? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy. Salam?
Yes, thank you, Judy, for this important question. And of course, you touch on 2 points. First, the independence of the judiciary. And here we consider it to be one of the mother of all battles, because we have to start at a point. And we strongly oppose the fact that the Council of Ministers has a say in the way that the judiciary are doing their own appointments. We think that reform starts there, even if the first attempt that they've done is not perfect, but it's not up to us or to the Council of Ministers to decide to mingle in the affairs of the judiciary. So independence of the judiciary is very important, and we are against the mingling in the internal affairs of the Hayat Qada. Now, or the appointment of them. Now, we can start putting people in jail today. We have the laws. The laws are not perfect, but we have the من أين لك هذا, the law that was passed by Remo Edde about 1951, I believe. We already have the tools between this law and between the لجنة مكافحة تبييض الأموال in Central Bank and the Attorney General. He is the guy. This is the side that can start making the dossier. It takes time to build judiciary files to open a question. But if they started yesterday, I think soon they would have enough evidence, especially we all hear television every day, and themselves in the parliament and on television, they go and show us documents and talk about each other, about the corruption of each other. So the evidence is there. Attorney General should move in ASAP to start forming the files that we can do to start putting people in jail and at least holding them accountable and responsible for their actions. Again, this is part of the reform we're asking for. That's why we're saying independent government, because somebody has to make these tough choices. The people that are making the tough choices and start the reform in opening files, in bringing them to the justice, etc., they cannot belong to one of the political parties. And this is what's happening today. So this is why nothing is moving. The reforms have not started, and there is no indication whatsoever that any fundamental reform is on its way to start.
Speaking of reforms, thank you, Salam, and thank you, Judy. I'll come back to the questions in just a minute. Speaking of the reforms that you mentioned, these are clearly, there's reforms everywhere you look in the state that are required. And currently, one of the most important reforms that are being discussed have to do clearly on, with what's going on with the IMF. And spokesperson Jerry Rice recently stated, and I quote, "There's a need for comprehensive reforms in many areas, which requires acceptance and consensus from the society as a whole." Salam, what is your opinion? What, in your opinion, are some of these required reforms that society needs to accept? And do you think these are limited to financial reforms, or would that be enough to convince the world that Lebanon's old ways have changed, or are there more fundamental reforms that are required?
Everything I touch, I find, right? There is corruption all over, and nothing really works well in Lebanon. But we have to start somewhere, don't we? And that I think this stopping the corruption, at least, making the law of the Freedom of Information Act, transparency is one quick reform that could start. Until now, when we ask a municipality, when we ask any government entity to see the contracts, to see the things that is by law that has passed, citizens' right to see, they're telling us, oh, we haven't started implementing this law. So this is step number one, transparency. Step number two is hadr al-fasad, right? So no need to put money, no need to put water in a tank that has a big hole in it. Well, Lebanon governance system has a big hole in it. Before we start closing that hole, there's no need to put any more water, any more money in it. Even if we get the money from the IMF today, we're going to do the same thing that we have been doing. Electricity is one thing we can start with, but it takes at least a year to show the results. So there are things that we can start with. Hay'at al-Ra'abiyya,
supervision, auditing, supervision, etc.
Yes, auditing, supervision. We have to start make this work. We have to start making the judiciary independent. We have to start, as Judy said, taking files to court, to sue the people that have done. And there must be a clear political decision that business as usual is not allowed, especially in the contracts and in the hiring people. At least if we start with these 5 things today, that would send a clear signal to people interested in giving Lebanon another chance. And let us not kid ourselves. The problem that we have today is a problem of trust. Again, this is why independent government is needed, because nobody is going to try something that has been tried. And these people, this political class has been tried for the last 30 years. Nobody's going to trust the banks anymore for another 5 years or maybe more. In order for us to do what we need to do, we need to restart the trust. So this is, again, I'm calling for a way out, is this independent government to start, and I'm saying only to start the trust-making process so that people, internal depositors, the Lebanese people themselves, or the investors whose money we need in order to jumpstart our economy, or the IMF and other countries of the world that would invest in Lebanon, in the treasury of Lebanon, in order to give us another chance.
Before I get to the next question of Walid, prep yourself in just a second. Just a quick follow-up on this. A lot of people have tried to or to make the revolution seem beholden to this or that, and clearly they failed because it's not. This said, isn't it important in some way or another for some of the potential donor or nations to understand some of the thought process going behind, or that the Thawra is involved in? Do you think they have that? Have your group met with the IMFs of this world, the World Banks, the multilaterals, in order to discuss the level of reforms that many Lebanese, including clearly yourself, believe in and think that are necessary before further commitments are made by the people and with further debt?
We have sent a letter to all the World Bank and all the Jihat al-Maniha, the donor countries, explaining to them that no need to put money in a tank that has a big hole in it. We're asking them not to give any money before reform starts. Not that somebody tells them we're going to start reform, but for the reforms to actually start. This is what we have done. But we have not gone into the meetings, the closed meeting or open meeting, whatever meetings with the IMF in order to negotiate this further.
Okay. Walid, I would like you to go ahead and pose your question. بعرف وليد أنه كتبته بالعربي، بتفضل اقرأ أنا بالعربي ولا بتفضل أنت تعرض سؤالك على
يلي بطريق؟
لا تفضل بالعربي أو بالإنجليزي اللي بيريحك. I know أنت مطلق بالعربي.
أنا بفضل بالعربي لأن انا انجليزيتي ما كثير قويه.
تفضل go ahead please.
ثانك يو. ست سلام، حكومه حسان دياب عاجلا ام اجلا بدها تسقط، ونحن مقتنعين بانه حزب الكتله الوطنيه لا ينطبق عليه ما ينطبق على احزاب لبنان التقليديه، حيث لا سلاح لا دماء لا فساد. فهل توافقين على ما يراود بالنا وهو دعوة المجموعات الثورية يلي اوريدي نحن عم نشبك مع عدد كبير منها حتى تنزل إلى الشارع برؤية موحدة بعد سقوط حسان دياب، ونناشد أنه والله نحن بدنا الست سلام لرئاسة الحكومة، هالمرة نحن اللي بدنا نملأ الفراغ، ما رح نقول لهم أنتم سموا ونحن بنعطيكم رأينا مثل ما عملنا مع الصفدي ومع سمير خطيب. وهل أعدت الكتلة وزراء لمثل هيدا الظرف، علما بأنه المهام للحكومة الثورية لن تكون إلا رد المال المنهوب وإجراء انتخابات؟ شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you وليد. سلام.
اوكي. بالعربي ولا بالانجليزي؟
لا تفضلي بالعربي ليقدر يفهم and maybe I'll do a very quick summary at the end for the expats who may or may not understand but please.
بالعربي بفهم أكثر.
تفضلي بالعربي. سلام.
هو سأل كذا سؤال يعني فايتين شوي ببعضهم. أول شيء بالنسبة لقبول رئاسة الحكومة، أنا ملتزمة بحزب سياسي وأنا جزء منه. هالحزب بيعتبر إنه كل القيادات تبعيتها من اللجنة التنفيذية والأمين العام ما فينا نترشح لانتخابات ونكون كمان أعضاء بالهيئة التنفيذية يا أما برئاسة الحزب. هلا أنا مضطرة، أنا ما بقبل هيك شيء، مع إنه هذا الشيء بشرفني طبعاً، بس أنا ملتزمة بالحزب، وإذا بيكون في غير معطيات لأنا أتنحى عن الرئاسة وأتنحى عن عضويتي باللجنة التنفيذية أكون مرشحة ثورة ولا غير شيء، هيدا قرار بيتاخذ من قبل اللجنة التنفيذية بدوني بهذا المجال. كمان عم بتقول انه عم تحكي على الاصلاحات الملحه المطلوبه اللي هن اثنين، هن اصلا اربعه، لانه في مثل ما بلشت احكي قبل في هو وقف الازمه الماليه، اما حاططها باقل ضرر ممكن على المودعين اللبنانيين الصغار. هذا اول شيء لازم نعمله. ثاني شيء لازم نعمله هو تغطيه صحيه شامله ومحاربه الفقر المدقع، ويمكن ضمان شيخوخه اذا كمان بقي، اذا لقينا نلاقي مصاري. هدول الشغلتين مهمين شو ما يصير، لانه الناس عم بتجوع ورح تجوع اكثر، وبال2021 رح تجوع كمان اكثر من هيدي السنه. ما فينا نترك بلد بدون شغل، بدون وظائف، وبدون كمان اساسيات الحياه يلي هي التغطيه الطبيه ومينيموم لشبكات الامان الاجتماعيه. هيدا لازم يكون ثاني شيء. ثالث شيء لازم نعمله اللي انت تطرقت عليه، استقلاليه القضاء ووقف الهدر ومكافحه الفساد، وطبعا محاوله استرداد الاموال المنهوبه. ورابع شغله هي مطالبه الحكومه بالتحضير لانتخابات نيابيه. قد ما فينا لازم نطالب انه تكون نزيهه وعادله. هدول المطالب.
اقدر اعلق شوي على الاجابه؟
اكيد.
سؤال وليد، لانه عندك سؤال اذا عندك بليز، لانه بعد في اربع ناس ناطرين بالهذا. بليز جو اهيد. سؤال جاست كويك فولو اب اذا بتريد.
لا بس كنت حابب اقول انه كنت مفكر انه تصورنا واحد باعتبار محاربه الفقر وضمان الشيخوخه وكل شيء قال منها الا نتاج نظام سياسي فاسد، ما علينا الا نغيره من خلال حكومه ثوريه. ما بنقول الا للحكومه تعمل لنا انتخابات، لن يحصل. بدنا حكومه ثوريه. كنت من قلبي بتمنى تكون الست سلام وندعمها، وهالحكومه الثوريه تعمل هالاشياء. الاشياء المطلبيه الثانيه بتجي لحالها تحصيل حاصل.
ثانك يو وليد.
هون موافقين.
اوكي ثانك يو.
سوري، سأل كمان وليد على الاسامي. نحن قبل ما طلعت حكومه حسن دياب كنا محضرين بفتكر 50 اسم ليتولوا الوزارات، وحتى الناس كمان تنقي من بيناتها. وما عندنا مشكل. بفتكر انه في كثير ناس منيح بلبنان، بنعتقد في كثير ناس وقدرات وناس بدهم يشتغلوا على المصلحه الوطنيه. إذا في إرادة في طريقة لنحط كل هدول الناس.
100%. Thank you.
Shukran, Walid. Thank you, Salam. Next question by Nancy Stefan. And then I have a quick question also that's coming from Facebook. Nancy, please, Nancy Stefan.
Yes, hello. Hi, Wissam. Hi, Salam Yafi. I have a question. It's a bit, okay, so you spoke about the necessity to create the power or a coalition powerful enough to claim some part of, claim back the power or anything. How are you as Kitle dealing with the unorganized groups of Thawra, which are many, and why I don't see the Kitle boldly recruiting people or members or supporters? So it applies as well for other أحزاب عابرة للطوائف. I don't know if it's on purpose or if it's just the environment does not allow boldly recruiting. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. Maybe we're not visible enough in what we do. We're not, we don't like to, I don't want to say a bad word here, but we're doing, it's a 24-hour per day job for us. So we're working at the same time on recruiting youth through this Af'al platform where they're not really Kitle, but where they can try the political work. This is going on. We're also very much in the regional expansion stuff. So every week or more than 2 days a week, we're outside Beirut talking to people, and and you have to get them one at a time. We're discovering that you have to make the recruits one at a time. So maybe it's not visible to the outside that we're working on this every day. We say about ourselves in Arabic, نحن مشروع وطن مش مشروع حزب. الكتلة now is kind of the plumber that, some people are better in downtown Beirut holding, doing the manifestation. Some people are better in this. National Bloc is seeing itself as the plumber. We are the one who work behind the scenes into making every block ready, every building block ready for everything to come together. So it's a lot of work on a lot of levels. I'd love to have a meeting with you, all people that want to show you all the work we are doing every day with numbers and with what we are doing. It's impossible. It's not on our radar screen to be vocal about what we're doing. Maybe one day we will do this, but for now it's work. Do the building blocks, be the plumber, be the one that people can depend on in order to get all of us to the next level. Because at the end, it's all of us who are gonna either make it or we're gonna all die.
Thank you. Thanks, Nancy. So please make sure you reach out for some recruitment strategies to Kitle and to Salam. I'm going to come back to the questions.
And by the way, we need your help, Nancy. I know how activist you are and how involved you are. So,
with pleasure, anytime. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to pause. I have Rabia and Nicola on hold for questions. Just hold on a couple of minutes. I do have a couple of things coming also. One question I do have for you, Salam, that is an extension of what Nancy just stated, which is how far is the reach, in your opinion? Clearly, the protests have been national and even in areas that are very untraditional in terms of being known as being protesting. Some of them even belonging or to the, if we can call it the hinterland of the incumbents. But the question I want to pose is, in your mind, the reach of the revolution's support, is it localized, is it regionalized, or is it really national at this point? And that's kind of an extension of what Nancy was trying to allude to. So could you answer this, and then I have a follow-up on this, please.
We saw in 17th of October, it's a national revolution. It's a national, everybody, as I said before, came down to the street. Now, it's unfair, I think, first to believe that the revolution is a person or a moral entity that has a head, legs, and arms, and unified leadership, etc. And it's unfair also to say that the revolution, the KPI, is a number of people in the streets. So we've been through a lot of metamorphosis. Usually people come down to the street when something bad happens to them, when the dollar gets up, or when there's no more gasoline, or when the WhatsApp tax was put, and eventually the government is going to do more stupid stuff that's going to let people go down in massive numbers to the street. It's unfair to just say the KPI of the revolution is a number of people in the street. I wish we had a meter to measure what's in people's hearts. You know, the Lebanese person is broken. The Lebanese person had enough. I don't know anybody from all my friends all around the world that has gone in as much trouble, in as much hardship as the Lebanese people. How do I measure this? And I know the people, even though if they don't go down to the Thawra, to the street, they have been broken, that if they see the light at the end of the tunnel, they know that they cannot continue as before. How do I measure this? Yeah, and this is the future. This is the future. So, you know, this is what we're working on. We're working with the people, everyone, in their villages, everywhere. And I'm telling you, people are not happy, and they know they're going into more and more hardship, and nobody is going to take care of them. So how do you convince these people that a leap of faith? George Khoury, please, can you mute yourself? Yeah.
George, can you please mute yourself? There's a lot of noise coming from your background. Thank you. Go ahead, Salam.
So what remains to be done, and this is something all of us, each one of us can do at their own level. How do you convince people that it takes a leap of faith to leave this old social contract between the sects and go to a social contract with the state? How do you get these people to have a leap of faith to believe it is possible to have a state that cares for everyone? And when I have to go to the hospital, there is a process, there's a law that allows me to go to the hospital, and not to go to a minister's office and kiss his feet and his hands in order for my mother to get a bed at the hospital. It's a leap of faith. And all of us have to work together in order to broadcast this message. Because people are broken, they believe the system doesn't work, they know the system doesn't work, but they haven't yet looked to the other side to do that step.
So the leap of faith, Salam, what's on the other side of the embankment, in your opinion? Is it a stronger state? Is it a state that believes in its citizens? Is it the other side of that leap of faith? Where are people going to be jumping towards?
No, they need to jump to another political system where it's a civil state, it's a rule of law state, it's a sovereign state, and it's a resistance state, and it's a liberal economy state. This is what we want. We can go into the detail of each one of them, and if you want, or if your guests want.
Great. I'm going to move to Rabia Matar. I know Rabia is probably going to ask something more along the lines of economics because he is an economist. But go ahead, Rabia. Please go ahead with your question.
No, for a change, I'm going to stick to politics.
No. Please ask me about economics.
It's coming. The section is coming.
Go
ahead.
Good to have you, Salam. Just to follow up, I was going to ask a totally different question, but on the leap of faith. They say people don't go to war unless they realize what they have to gain more than they have to lose. And I think this is where the revolution, our uprising, is failing to present. But anyway, this is just thinking loudly with you. I'm going to take you back to the Thawra groups, and because I'm really still not satisfied and worried about the next step further. What is really, in your assessment, and I know that you and I and many people on this gathering today been on the ground from day one, what is really stopping us from forming a coalition, a political coalition that coordinates the work and ultimately goes to become Jabhat Mu'arada? The second question is the Arm of Hezbollah. Now, this is still a divisive element within the different Thawra groups. And we saw this in the last, on the 6th of June, when some groups of the Thawra raised the issue of Slah Hezbollah. Now we all know that Hezbollah is the big white elephant in the room. And this is a divisive question. I would like to hear your opinion as a party on delaying this issue in terms of delaying the issue of Slah Hezbollah to disarm Hezbollah, because we have so many other problems that are much more urgent. And this becomes a problem that will be tackled once we achieve a change in power, a rule of law, etc. Or it's not feasible with Hezbollah being armed.
Thank you, Rabia. Salam?
Okay, so two things. Our position about Hezbollah is first, and secondly, about why the revolution did not or does not want to talk about this. So the National Bloc Party the National Bloc Party is against duality of arms in any time or space or time. So we are against the duality of the arms. We believe that all arms should be under the Lebanese armed forces in any state that is a state. Okay, so this is this is our position. Now, we also understand that the arms of Hezbollah is a national problem. It divides Lebanese people among themselves. And it is a true problem because it is important for a lot of people. And it's a very divisive question. And that we believe the way to solve this question is through national dialogue, especially that we are Lebanese and they are Lebanese. We have to find a way to either convince them or us or them convince us, right? It's a national dialogue at the level of the whole state that has to take place. And this is the only way for us to solve problems through dialogue. About, I think, the 17th of October, as I said before, the young people and old people, the Thawra, were very, not emotionally, politically mature, because when they went to the street, they said we are going down to the street because of matalib ma'ishiyi, because of corruption, because of jobs, because of health, etc. And they did not bring it up. Maybe because they knew, because it was a divisive issue. And now what we're seeing, the revolution, some are repeating these slogans, is, I have two explanations for this. One explanation is that the political parties themselves are bringing this in order to divide the revolution. And the other the other explanation that I have is that it's easy for us to fall back into 8 and 14. We've been doing this since 2005. It did not lead to anything, right? So why try something that has already been tried? The division between 8 and 14 is not the right division in the present day, where the state is bankrupt, the banks are in technical bankruptcy, there is no social safety net, there are no more jobs. Okay? Yes, Hezbollah is the elephant in the room, but I think there are several elephants in the room. If we leave the political system as it is, as I described it from the beginning, with the corruption, with the not following the rule of law, with all these 6 political parties cutting up the contracts and doing all the corruption stuff that they're doing, you think all our problems are going to be solved? We have a lot of problems. We have a lot of problems. Hezbollah is one of them, but we have other problems. We cannot just single-handedly say, this is the only problem of Lebanon. If we just fix that, everything will be solved. No, before Hezbollah, we had problems. We had civil wars. And before Hezbollah, we had in 1969, Remo Edde stood alone in parliament for 2.5 hours saying why we should be against the Cairo agreement. He was a friend of the Palestinians. He was with the Palestinian cause. Yet he stood against the Cairo agreement that allowed the arms of the Palestinians to be legal in Lebanon. And he said, this is the beginning of the decline of Lebanon. Be careful. you're going to open the country wide open to all the foreign powers and corruption too, because in 1970s, the Palestinian militia were also doing the illegal trafficking, and they were making a lot of money out of having arms too. He said that in 1969, and fair enough. Unfortunately, he was right, because after 1969 came the civil war, and we have been declining ever since.
Salam, I would like to follow up this question of Rabia. Thank you, Rabia. In his latest discourse, Hezbollah Secretary General advised the Lebanese people to start looking east. Can Lebanon afford to abandon its or to bet on one direction versus the other? Is there a way for Lebanon to entertain a strategy based on strategic equilibrium that doesn't alienate any of its internal communities? And how would you convince the international community of such a need if you believe in such an equilibrium?
I believe it is what is needed for Lebanon to be neutral plus, whatever. There is no need for Lebanon to have enemies more than we already have Israel as our #1 enemy. And then I think it's good enough if all of us decide that this is the enemy, and let's see what we can do to be better than this enemy. And by the way, here there are other ways that we can fight. Besides arms, we can be better in science, we can be better in engineering, we can be better in IT, etc. But I'm not going to go there. Let me respond to the going east stuff. So for people who know how China operates, basically, China gives projects, gives money to do infrastructure projects of what it finds strategic needs, ports, major highways, etc. And it asks to be reimbursed in US dollars, right? So what we're saying, if I understand correctly, when he said, look east, he was looking for China to be, instead of said, as an infrastructure project, and because China would not give money to the treasury. Today we are in a situation where we need some money to the treasury. The only side that can give money to the treasury is the IMF as we know it today. I hope some other generous mind is going to give money without any conditions to the Lebanese treasury, but today the only choice available on the table to put cash in the treasury of Lebanon is the IMF. But also I want to say a little bit more about this looking east. So what is he suggesting? He's suggesting that we give all the infrastructure project to China. But I think one of the biggest problems that Lebanon did is to give these contracts with taradi. That means there was no open procurement process, open and transparent, in order to give contracts. We know that the CDR gave, for 30 years of its existence, all the contracts to 14 companies in 30 years. Okay, and now we hear every day about this deal, about the garbage, this deal. We should refuse to have bitaradi contracts with anybody. We should let the French and the Armenians and the Americans and the Chinese and the Russians, why don't they bid fair and square on the procurement process that we put and let the best deal win?
So the interest of the Lebanese people, above all east or west, it's basically look inside as opposed to east or west. Well, thanks for that.
Always look inside first, find out شو المصلحة الوطنية, what is needed for Lebanon, and then and only then act.
I have one question from Nicola. He's been waiting for a while. Nicola, please go ahead. Thank you, Rabia. You're on mute, Nicola, so can you please unmute yourself? Thank you.
Hello, Wissam. Hello, Salam. First, it's a pleasure meeting you, Salam, because I heard a lot about you, but when I hear you in real, I'm amazed. Maybe you don't know me. I'm a banker, economist. I try to write solutions to save the country. It happens. I don't know if you received the last one. I will not talk economy like Rabia today. I heard you talking about Amwal al-Manhube, and you proposed, in fact, to apply the laws, Law 44, the CRS, maybe the MAC law that Milhid Khalaf proposed, whatever law. The concern I have with this approach is that today, whatever the process, the legal process to go through, it will take a 10-year time, and you will not collect more than 5 or 10%. And what you will collect, you will pay it on legal fees. So it's not worth it. Why don't we go smarter through a process like what happened in Brazil, the famous Lava Jato operation, or in Guatemala, or even in France when the fiscal people try to fly away? With taradi, that means we know that you are a thief, you have stolen the country, there is a fund, please rebuild it back with your money, and we forget it. This approach is very much privileged nowadays in terms of stolen money collection, and it's more efficient, and we can collect much more. What's your opinion about it?
Thank you, Nicolas. Salam?
Yeah, thank you, Nicolas. Yes, why not? I will put this in the toolbox. But Taradi, why not? But at the end of the day, look, Istibdad al-Amal Manhubi, even if it's going through the process of it, it's a very important fact, because that means the people are asking for accountability, for people to be held responsible. Even if this process takes time, and we know in advance that it will take time, 5 to 10 years, and we know ahead of time that we're not going to get the 80 billion that have disappeared. It's going to be, as you said, 5 to 10%, whatever it is that we're going to be able to recover. But I think it's a very important process to rebuild the trust and rebuild accountability. People that have done harm should not be forgotten. People that have done harm for 30 years has to be called for what they are.
No, Salam, I'm not saying we should forget them. On the contrary, we should put them in jail if possible. But now you were rightly saying that we need liquidity to the country, and the only liquidity is the IMF. But the IMF liquidity is nothing. It's a $900 million, 870 exactly, a year if the reforms. And we need 7 billion a year. So we have a big problem coming ahead in the next 3 months. Either we go to starving the population, or the country will be collapsing, and we need a way. We cannot say, I don't want to do this and not do that, and at the end we collect 800 million if we do the reform. Because the foreign reserve in the central bank, there is still $1 billion in it. Otherwise, they will hit the mandatory reserve of the banks. I'm sure you know the numbers. So we are facing a huge problem today. The faster we can collect money and liquidity to the country.
No, Nicola, I cannot not agree with you. You are absolutely correct. And this is one of the specificity of the Lebanese financial crisis. Unlike all the other countries that you mentioned, and Cyprus and Greece and all of this, the amount of the debt that we have, the amount of the hole we are in is horrendous. Never before have we seen the magnitude of it. You know, $80 billion, you're right. Not one solution alone is going to dent. And it's going to require that we look again at our economic model, because also all the Lebanese have been living, the government has been living definitely above its means. The Lebanese person has been living above its means. It's time to rethink economy. And with the COVID that has happened also lately, I think it's time for a new economic model. And here I look again at the youth about circular economies, about sharing economies. I think we're in, nobody can solve our problems except ourselves. And maybe we start looking at other ways to cultivate the land, are finding alternate solutions, depending on each other, reduce our consumption. It's going to be,
go ahead, Salam.
It's going to be a basket where we need to do a lot of the stuff at the same time. You know, it's going to be Istibdad al-Amal Manhubi. It's going to be IMF or some other donors. It's going to be reducing our spending. It's going to be improving our productive sectors. We have to do all of this at the same time, you know, in order for us to come in few years or 2 to 5 years to a solution. Our problems are.
I have a question for you, follow up. Thank you, Nicola. We have like another 5 questions to go. So thank you, Nicola. Salam, I'm getting several questions here also. One of them has to do with it's economic also. So thanks, Nicola, for the segue. It's basically about the transition to this kind of an economy that you are talking about. So right now, clearly, we have almost 50% of the Lebanese population, 40%, excuse me, under the age of 24. Huge unemployment in that, not to mention the older ones. There's issue with GDP basically falling by about, I think, up to estimates from 50 down to 30, which would be something in the range of about 25 to 30%. So the problems are pretty sizable to deal with. Now, what I just heard you say is you're looking at a multidisciplinary, a multifaceted approach. The question that I have when it comes to specifically microeconomically, what you just mentioned, the per capita GDP of a Lebanese is about 1/6 of the per capita GDP of an expat, and I have a lot of expats on the call right now. We're interested in knowing, is this a productivity issue in Lebanon that could be structurally quickly shifted, or is this something that is going to require, some behavioral? I have here Elisar Abu Jawdi. She's basically looking at it from a behavioral economics perspective. And kind of like an anthropological, that's something that cannot be structurally shifted very easily. What is your opinion on this? Because that in a way or another is going to determine the degree of, quote unquote, begging that we're going to have to do, that difference between what we can produce and what we're going to need to get ourselves out of the hole. What's your take on this?
Yes, you cannot separate politics from economy. They go hand in hand. And one of the main problems with our economy is that it's not a productive one. We know that. It was driven by, unfortunately, remittances that used to go for consumption and maybe buying of the real estate. We'll talk about this later a little bit for the diaspora problem. Also, we are not a capitalistic system. I don't think it's any liberal economy the way that we have been operating Lebanon. It's an economy that doesn't believe in competition at all. So it's an agglomeration of cartels, of monopolies. Everything in Lebanon is a monopoly, from whiskey to the resistance against Israel. This is also a monopoly. They go hand in hand. Everything is a monopoly. The medicine, the whiskey, the resistance, everything goes together. And we have to start thinking in a competitive mindset. Liberal economy means there is competition. That means if a young company with a young entrepreneur has as much chance to get a contract as Jihad Arab. We're not there yet. So we have to work on this. Now for the diaspora, and good or for bad, we have a large number of diaspora, people still believing in their country, Lebanon, and willing to help. And this is a great asset to Lebanon. And that's why all my years in policy making, diaspora is brought up as a solution to every problem of Lebanon. But what is really needed here from the diaspora is not only the remittances that go, 70% of all the inflows of Lebanon go to consumption. I send to my mom, I send to my brother, and buying a home for my retirement. We need FDI, we need foreign direct investment. We need the diaspora people to put money in the young entrepreneurs, in the young companies, in the productive companies that will then create the jobs in order to achieve a certain economic growth after the disaster we are in. 170 to 200,000 jobs have been lost in the last year, in the last year alone. This is how I see the diaspora. But I'm going to ask you, Wissam, are you willing to put money again in Lebanon in these conditions?
Not under these conditions. I mean, as a technology company, as an owner of a technology, we do hire in Lebanon, but it's to operate in Lebanon as a company is clearly there's infrastructural issues, there's legal issues, there's there's patenting issues, all that kind of stuff. So there's plenty of work to be done. But that does bring another point that I would like to pose before I move to Karim Mroué and Jose Makari for some of their questions. Us in the diaspora, we enjoy rights that as Lebanese we don't. In a way it hurts, but in a way it also gives us I guess, a roadmap of where we can go. So I'd like to also discuss the issue of rights, not just for the diaspora, because you as, I'll say it as such, you as a Lebanese woman in Lebanon, let's say if you're dual citizenship, you probably enjoy a lot less rights than you would if you were a Lebanese Canadian or a Lebanese from other countries. That to us is something that is very important. The issue of rights, a lot of the demands of the people on the streets are for their rights. Do you feel that there is a compelling need for something such as a Bill of Rights in Lebanon? What are your thoughts on this? I know we've discussed this in larger groups, etc., but I'd love to hear your own honest opinion about what you think a Bill of Rights would represent to you as a citizen and to other fellow citizens, be they living in Lebanon or in the diaspora.
Yes, thank you. You know, I'm a fan of the Bill of Rights that Wissam, you were part of it. And it's something the National Bloc has taken, and we're putting it in our civic workshop where we go around the country to talk about what it means to be Lebanese and ask the people, right? We have to come to a national agreement that we all want to be Lebanese first and what it means to be Lebanese before we can build a state, a civil state, and do the leap of faith, as I was saying. In the diaspora, maybe you are lucky that you all lived abroad, and you know that when you go to KSA or United States or any other, or any country, people don't see you only as a Muslim from Trablus or from Beirut, right? You don't have that identity anymore, and people deal with you as Wissam, as your, as what you can bring as a value in a true meritocracy.
Indeed.
Okay, so the good thing about the diaspora people is they don't need to have a leap of faith into a civil state because they have tasted it, they have lived it. Here in Lebanon, what I find when I talk about the Bill of Rights, they believe like people in Lebanon are willing to do great stuff for their country. And maybe they love this country more than they love themselves, willing to go through hardship in order for that. And they don't believe that the electricity and the water and the healthcare that they are asking for is part of the Bill of Rights. You know, it's their fundamentals. So I find that we need to also talk a lot more about it in order for people to say, okay, this is my God-given right. Why do I let go of it? And maybe this is a starting point also for the civil state of the future.
Thank you, Salam. I'm going to take a question from Karim Mroué. Karim, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Perfect, loud and clear. Go ahead, Karim.
Okay. Hello, Salam, how are you? It's a great pleasure to finally see you in action. I'm one of the lucky few that knew, not few, many knew Yamout, but I knew him as a young man, and he used to work as a team with his brother Pierre, and they inherited a very complicated history from their father Emin, and yet they came up with something. يعني الكتلة الوطنية, the way they created it was really stellar in terms of its achievements and reputation. One thing they always did is think out of the box. And you can see that from early 50s when they enacted, when they presented a law against illegal enrichment. Also in 1956, I think, sorry, I think it was 1959, the banking secrecy, and the Yamout's position against اتفاق القاهرة in 1969. All of these were like out of the box and very creative policies. Which brings me to my question. Actually, I have two. You were talking about the need to reform our economy and the need to reimagine our economy. And as you know, the Lebanese people are the most entrepreneurial people in the world. And yet they live in their country in an environment that is most hostile to entrepreneurial spirit. So have you as the Kitli given any thought as to how to overcome that and provide incentives for people like Wissam and others to come and invest in Lebanon? The barriers are very high, and they're not only legal. You face that at every level, من المختار, from the Mukhtar level to the municipalities, to the law structures, to the licensing, and finally to electricity itself. Okay, there are many things that need to be dealt with. Have you thought about how to make Lebanon business friendly? This is one. No, I have another question, please.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, and I'll be quick on this one. I'm going to be a little bit more annoying than Walid. Okay, Walid Mhab. As you know, things are going bad and going bad very quickly. And we might be faced with the collapse of the government, of Hassan Diab's government, sooner than we think. And I would say that it's a matter of few months where we'll be faced with a vacuum that needs to be filled. You are one of the few names that have been circulated in the Thawra as candidate for prime ministership. Okay, my question, you fudged the answer the first time. I'm going to grill you a little bit further on this. Have you steeled yourself inside? Have you prepared yourself inside as Salam Yamout and as a woman, okay, to take on this challenge? And trust me, one last thing, trust me, if you do that, you'd be doing what Remo Eddy used to love to do, which is doing things that are out of the box.
Thank you, Karim, for the questions. Salam, go ahead.
Thank you, Karim. I would like to see you soon to talk.
I hope so.
No, thank you. I mean, I'm honored by what you say about me and mainly about also Remo Eddy, because rightfully so, a lot of the izdihar, of the prosperity that we saw in the Lebanon of the 1960s, 50s, 60s is due to this man, and the fact that he was a true opposition, and the fact that he spoke his mind and believed only in right and in the good of all Lebanon. And this is very important because you said some of the laws, but I can continue telling you that the vote for women is because of him. عدم دفع الضرائب للأراضي الزراعية. Okay, so imagine in 1950s already seeing that agriculture is one of the main things for Lebanon, and on and on, etc., etc. So thank you very much for remembering him, and we are following in his footsteps. For the entrepreneur thing, it's known what we have to do. There are indicators that really they are on the back of my mind when I sleep at night. And the first one is doing business, because let's deal a little bit with this role of the government. In Lebanon, we have a government that is able to be corrupt because it has a concentration of power. So the government in Lebanon is the policymaker, the regulator, the operator, and the service provider in many, many, many sectors, including sectors that in all over the world, like electricity and telecom, that is known now since 1980s. The whole world believes that private sector can be an operator and a service provider for telecom services. But here in Lebanon, no. We do all things in the value chain. And the one that we do least of is the policy making part. Yani we do business as usual, we do service provision, but we don't ask ourselves, what is the policy behind telecom? What is the policy behind health? And let's see what we want as a government to happen, and then let's see who can provide this for us. So doing business is one of our main, I'm really sorry, Wissam, but can we mute everyone except me?
I think I'll try to mute. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. I think it was coming. Okay. Go ahead, please.
So doing business, Lebanon fell from number 89 in 2007 to 133 2 years ago. This is the last time I checked. We're falling down. One other indicator that's very dear to my heart is a global innovation index. Again, we're now among the bottom half when we were, if we take the quality of the human being in the global innovation index, you will see Lebanon is pretty much high up in the tens. And then you see policy making role in innovation, you see Lebanon is 140 over 140 or something like that. These are two indicators that are very dear to our heart. And I think it goes along with the role of the government that I explained. The role of the government is one of enabler and not necessarily one of operator and service providers, right? So, and we know what, there's like a whole bunch of laws and a whole bunch of things that we know what to do about this. The last question, and I don't want to dodge your question, say Salam did not answer, about the prime minister stuff. I see myself as a person, right? I think I can do the job. I know how to do the job because I had 6 years training also at the PCM, so I know how it works. But it's really not about me. I'm not dodging your question. I truly believe that it is time for other people to decide and for my party to be in power to decide. Now in my current position, I am not able to do two roles, to be the president of the National Bloc and something else.
Thank you, Salam.
But I thank you very much for the kind word, B'tsharraf, but I hope I did not dodge the question this time.
No, I think you answered it pretty well. You told me that you're prepared, and this gives us comfort in the Thawra to continue considering you as one of our candidates.
So that's what we say at the National Bloc. That's what we say. We say we're not optimists. Okay. We have a plan.
Thank you.
It's different.
It's good to do both. It's good to do both. Salam, thank you, Karim. Salam, I have a question from a young chap, and he's identified him as such. And I love our young the young of the country. So I hope he's still on. Jose Macari or Jose Macari, are you there?
Jose Macari.
Please go ahead. Yes. Go ahead, Jose.
First of all, it was a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Salam and Mr. Wissam. And I wish you will be the first female president in Lebanon. And by the way, I'm 16 years old, and I don't know politics and economy like you do. But what I saw in the revolution was not, 100% honest. I mean, you take a look at the US, you take a look at Ukraine, Germany, other countries. Most of them, they forget political parties and they protest. But not all of our streets were reflecting our dreams. Why Lebanon is always very different, and there is a political party to blame for this, or no? And thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you. Jose or Jose?
Jose.
Thank you, Jose. Salam?
Thank you.
Yes.
Are we going to steal the dreams of our youth by not providing them a way to really believe they are part of the process, knowing that 40% of our population is them and their dreams and their... I love that generation, by the way. I'm sorry to say that, but this generation is just unbelievable. I see what they do with their, with their fingertips. So I'd love to hear what you have to say to Jose.
Yes. So Jose, thank you for the question. I think you put your finger on the right place. Politics, in Lebanon has been dirty politics, because as I explained before, politics is used for corruption and not to have a vision for the country and a plan and a budget and a KPI and all of this. So a lot of young people are disgusted. Actually, a lot of women were disgusted by politics. That's why you don't see politics. A lot of people used to ask me in the past, why women are not in politics? I said, because, women, there's a certain level of dirtiness that a woman and a young person, a free young person can take, right? So, yes. And this is our job today, as a revolution, as political opposition, as people who are not happy with the current political system, to start defining what politics is. It's the role of the National Bloc to make politics be what it's supposed to be, which is policy making, good policy making for all people, principles, visions, all the stuff that go with it. The people in Lebanon, especially the youth, are disgusted, as I said, and that's why we see they don't like to be in politics. But they went down to the street because they don't agree that all the problems are Lebanon are only because I am Sunni and you're Shia and he is Orthodox and he is Maronite. The young people don't want to hear this. They don't actually believe that this maybe matters a lot to them. They want to live as free people, to have access to education, to jobs, to good water, to clean air, to breathe, etc., etc. And this is what we're trying to do at the National Bloc. But with this Af'al platform that allows political savvy people like yourselves that don't necessarily want to be National Bloc, but to try what politics is in an environment that is a political environment. And then the rest is going to be you. You're going to be writing a history, Jose, not us.
Yes, of course.
I'll be dead by then, but it's you. It's the generation of my children's. Is all the generation we failed you, and I'm really sorry for this. You know, it's very dear to my heart, but I think maybe the time has come. Maybe now we can do the stuff together and give you a voice, a place where you can speak, a place where you can give your ideas, and the party will follow up on these ideas.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you very much.
Salam, before there's two questions that are waiting to be posed, I'd like to pose a couple of things from a society perspective. Did you want to say something?
Yes, about the entrepreneurship. You know, a friend of mine used to say, actually this was a question I had prepared for you, Wissam, because yesterday you told me, this is the only question you didn't ask me yet. Why Lebanon, right? Why should we believe in Lebanon? Well, first, because it's an oasis of freedom. It attracted a lot of political refugees from all over at least the region. And it's an oasis of diversity. The whole region is an oasis of diversity for thousands of years. We keep on forgetting that we are a diverse people. This is very important about Lebanon, the sense of freedom. The challenge here is not to make freedom become chaos, but we are proud of the freedom that we have, and we're the only country in the region that still has some freedom. So we are totally against anybody taking this freedom from us. One. Two, we have the young population, because you talked about, and that's why I'm segueing into this question, about half of the Lebanese are under the age of 35, which is great. And the entrepreneurial spirit, as I said, you know, before even BDL Law 331 or Circular 331 to give money to the entrepreneurs, by the time that we went to Singapore, the Lebanese were par with the Jordanian and the Egyptian in terms of number of entrepreneurs and number of ideas and number of companies. This is exceptional. The Lebanese people, the Lebanese entrepreneurs did this by themselves without help from anybody. Actually, the Circular 331 money kind of messed up the whole scene because money was in the game, and then again, this. And here is the message, because Lebanese are good entrepreneurs. Now we know this, but the challenge in front of us, and we haven't been practicing this a lot, is how to become good team players, how to turn this individual strength into a community strength, into a communal strength. It's a challenge for all of us because we're all entrepreneurs in our mind, in a way. You know, now the challenge for us is to find ways to work together. Again, this is what Af'al is trying to do, because it's only by working together, by working with the other, that maybe we can make this individual success story become a community success story. This is a challenge ahead of us. I think we can do it.
Thank you for that. This is a great segue to the next question that I had before I pass it on to George. But one of the major concerns that we see when looking at the deteriorating state of Lebanon is the levels of the dire levels of poverty and the effects that society is starting to face. It seems that some of the leaders that are in power today are completely oblivious to it. either in utter denial or even in certain cases promoting it for their own interests. My question to you is, what is, how do you approach society to tell them this is going to be painful to all of us, but this community element, how do you do it while they are barely being able to serve food on the table of their children? It can't be easy.
I don't have to tell them, Wissam, they know it. They feel it. Every day they wake up, they have to look for their food. They have to find jobs for their children. They have to go to the hospital. They have to step over the garbage to get to their home. I don't have to tell them anything. People know that we are in a deep, deep thing. And thank you, Nancy. We know we are in trouble. We know we are in a lot of trouble. You heard Nicolas Shihani today, and we hear it every day. Now, segue to my first thing. It is time now. What we see the Lebanese doing is they started becoming solidarity together. They cleaned the Thawra by themselves, recycled more garbage than Lebanon has recycled together in so many years. They have gone into providing food for each other before the government even got the lists ready to know to whom they're going to send the food. They're doing now initiatives about planting, cultivating lands. If it is in Arc-en-Ciel or it is in Ardi Ardak, which is a great community-driven initiative to help people, get the seeds they want and plant the food in their gardens, on their balcony, in their rooftop, and all over Lebanon. Because a lot of farmers have not planted their lands this year because they didn't have dollars to pay for the grains and pay for the chemical, the engrais chimique, the compost, right? And this is, so what I am believing in and what I am betting on is the solidarity of the Lebanese people who are creative, who are innovative, who have lived through wars, through unthinkable, and now they will come together to help each other, to be solidarity with each other in order to come out of this crisis. Because we're probably going to be faster than what the government is going to be able to give us.
Salam, there's somebody on Facebook, Elisar, is saying something to the sort, which is when the villagers asked Idde for a job once upon a time, he did not give them a job. He basically sent them the Mashrou' al-Akhdar up to the mountains and to advise them on better irrigation and farming. And all those men made little reservoirs you see in the pictures of La'lu as a result of that. That was a comment, I guess, as a follow-up to what you were saying, as opposed to providing people the fish. Why don't you buy them? I suppose the statement of Elisar is, why don't you, kind of help them develop their own land, or if, in place of giving them the fish, give them the rods to fish with that.
Yes.
There's two more questions.
Change is mentality, Wissam. I'm sorry I go back to it, but it is about changing the way of thinking. The way of thinking about what the government role is, what our role towards this government is, accountability, transparency, all of these things, and the leap of faith, but also the way we think. We have to change the way we think. It starts there. And this is the biggest thing that nobody can crush. They can maybe put us in jail for saying bad things on Facebook. They can put us in jail for going down to Martyrs Square and holding a flag, but they cannot, in anything they do, change the way we feel and change our head. Our head is our treasure. Our head is our weapon. They cannot, in whatever they do, make us believe what we don't want to believe. And this is our strength.
Thanks, Salam. I have two more questions. I know we're coming up to the top of the hour and we don't want to abuse more of your time. Ziad Hadara, please go ahead and pose your question. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Wissam. Hi, Salam. Thank you for your time. My question is, obviously in this group, we approve very much of all the work that's being done at the National Bloc. And at the very least, we feel that there is, a sense of integrity being brought back to Lebanese politics, which we have missed a lot in our Lebanese politics. But my question to you personally is, you must have some, on a personal level, imposed some restrictions on yourself being the head of a party. I'm sure there are some limitations that you have to sort of abide by some guidelines and whatever. The question is if you are on the street with the rebels and not really constrained by being the head of the National Bloc right now, you are on the street with the rebels, with these groups, what would you advise these groups? What would you advise us to do? What is it that you say, I wish they would do this. I can't do it myself because I'm at the head of the National Bloc, but I wish they would go ahead and do it right now. What is your advice to the rebel groups at this stage?
Yes, thank you, Ziad. I was on the street with the rebels.
Yes, yes, but now, I understand that you must have some restraints being at the head of a party. Let's say
I go down. I go down and I participate. Look, the day that the 7 kids lost their eye, I went with a friend of mine to Hotel Dieu, and actually she raised the money needed in like 3 hours. I tell you what, you know how strongly I feel about this political system and how badly I want to change it. But to me, if one more eye is going to be lost, or one life is going to be lost, I want them to stay for another 10 years. For me, human being is our treasure. It's our values. I will be willing to give up anything for one eye not to go, not to be lost, and one life. My only advice to the Thawra people is, let's try to keep it peaceful. Let's try to do it, to not shed blood, and to use peaceful ways of protesting in order to sustain and remain and get what we want. This would be my only advice, because I don't believe in blood. I don't believe in young people having to lose their lives or their eye or their hand because of anything, because they're going to grow up and they're going to regret one day.
Thank you, Salam. Thank you, Salam. Last question from Bahi. Please go ahead and pose your question.
Yes. Hi, Salam. Thanks for that discussion covering lots and lots of points, and nice to finally meet you. Meet you at least. One thing I took up, which I'm quite interested in general, أنه أنت قلتي كتلة مشروع وطن ومش مشروع حزب. And I like that, but also I want to kind of corner this word. You use the word وطن, مش as opposed to مشروع دولي. So between the nation and the state, and how much you have talked about, and we're all very aware of how much the nation is doing, whether it's terms of the society, which is helping each other, as you have mentioned, NGOs like Arc-en-Ciel, Ardi Ardak, etc. This is really taking up where the state is not doing. And what is the National Bloc, الكتلة الوطنية, شو الvision تبعكم in terms of the state's involvement in future, whether now as opposition, as we all are in opposition, or in future, you know, where does the state, how big is the state going to be or should be? And especially because you also mentioned at the moment it's both operations and policy and regulator. You know, we need to slim it down. How far down do we slim it? What's the Kitle's vision on that? But more importantly, how do we get there knowing that there are 300,000 employees of the state at the moment, whether contractual or full-timers, etc.?
Thank you, Bahi. Salam?
How many hours do I have to answer Bahi's question?
we can start
2
now.
minutes. 2 minutes with another question, with another question and a final statement. So go ahead.
I guess I don't know, Wissam and Dina. I mean, we can have another one just on the public policy, because we have 101, and a whole bunch of them is related to your question about the size of government and what it needs to happen. Unfortunately, today, and I know the IMF is going to require this, but for now, the 330,000 people on the payroll of the government, this is unemployment in disguise. A lot of this is unemployment in disguise. So I don't think we can start with this, but there are, there's whole plans about what we can do, and we don't believe in a state, in a government as large as it is today. Yesterday, I was checking with my friend that about the Lebanese government spending or in percent of GDP is about 27%, which is not unrealistic as a budget. However, the problem is because out of this $10 billion that the government spent every year, World Bank reports and everybody says there is lost about $5 to $7 billion of this money is lost due to corruption. So we could have a smaller government that gives better services with less money. We know this for sure. And now if there is some restructuring of the debt as well, because you know our budget is 30%, our spending is 30% on khidmat al-dain, on the service of the debt, 30% on the 330,000 on the public wages, and then we have 10%, about 10%, 12% on electricity, 4% on capital expenditure, which is what you need to do, and all the rest is 10%. Yani the health and the education and everything goes in the last 10%. This cannot continue. This cannot continue. And we'd love to have another session if you want in depth to show you also how we see the division of the GDP on the things that we'd like to do. We also have this this plan and vision in place.
Thank you, Salam. Thank you, Bahi. Salam, I think we have abused your time substantially. So I would invite anybody who did not have a chance to pose a question to please send it to the moderators, and we will happily pass it to Salam and her team in order to answer you. Salam, I will end it with this. I don't know if, I know you know a lot about me, but I don't know if you know that I just published a fictional novel last year, and it's about Lebanon and in the future. And in the novel, it's actually a woman prime minister who turns things around. So I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's prescient, but I would like to wish you the best in Kitli with your program, as well as the entire team, Pierre and everybody there that's working hard. I'd like to also thank you so much for all your time and your comments to your honest opinions and comments that you provided us. And hopefully we can see you more often, talking to more and more people so that we can share this message of hope for a better future. So thank you so much, Salam. And if you'd like to say anything to end this, please go ahead.
Thank you, Wissam, CCG, for hosting. Thank you for all people who listened. And I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Let's have more discussion. You're all invited to Beit al-Kitli remotely or in person if you are in Beirut. We'd love to sit down and show you the program and take the time it takes, for example, to answer to questions like Bahi's and other things. And Wissam, I'm waiting for the novel. You can send it to me by Lebanon Post.
I will. Yeah, we'll do it technologically via some ebook or something.
Or PDF. You know, I still like the books, the feeling of a book. So I would, if you can send it over, I will be happy, happily be reading it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everybody. Thank you. This session.
See you Beit al-Kitli. Salam.
Yeah, Rabia. See you soon. Bye, Habib.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, Wissam. Thank you, Salam.
Thanks, Thawra. Thanks, Thawra TV.
Well done. Wonderful.